Have I ever mentioned how great it is to actually have real racing things to talk about again? I don't think I'm ever going to take that for granted. Let's get into it. A busy Wednesday in news. Let's talk about everything that's happening in the world of racing. And starting out with something that is not motorsports related directly, but is floating under the radar of a lot in the motorsports community. And that is today that Ron DeSantis, the governor of the state of Florida, gave the order to allow full NFL stadiums starting today. Now, this is good news for those of you who want to attend the Daytona 500 and are expecting 100,000 people there. Now, the question will be whether or not NASCAR is willing to allow that many people to be in the stands next February. We'll just have to wait and see, but it looks like Governor DeSantis will not stand in the way of it if NASCAR wants it to be. Rumor has it that Mick Schumacher, the son of seven-time Formula One world champion Michael Schumacher, will be headed to Formula One next year in one of the Alfa Romeo seats. We'll have to see how this goes, but it certainly seems like Schumacher is being tapped to move up the Ferrari F1 ladder. The NHRA has signed a new title sponsor for next year. Camping World has stepped up, as we talked about in the NHRA video about the lawsuit against their current title sponsor, Coca-Cola. And certainly this confirms that yes, Coca-Cola will not be coming back to the NHRA anytime soon. Going to be lots of Pepsi in those coolers from now on. Hallie Deegan will be making her Truck Series debut at the Kansas Speedway. She'll be doing it for DJR Crossley. It'll be interesting to see how NASCAR Twitter's favorite driver fares in her first NASCAR Truck Series outing. But one of the big stories today is the fact that Indy Lights released that they will be moving to a halo in 2021 in terms of cockpit protection. And yes, Indy Lights still exists and are still very much intending on having a 2021 season. The halo unit that will be applied to each of the Dallara chassis will be Dallara designed and made of titanium. There was even more good news for the Indy Lights series coming down the pipeline. Specifically, that the winner of next year's championship will see an increased purse of $1.25 million and a guaranteed entry into the 2022 Indianapolis 500, along with two other races of his or her choice. Not only that, but the top three in the championship will be guaranteed a post-season IndyCar test at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. And this is certainly good news for the road to Indy and specifically Indy Lights. I mean, let's face facts here. The fact that the season was canceled, that was a big blow. But the good thing about this was that the folks at IndyCar, that includes Mark Miles and Roger Penske, and then the folks over at Anderson Promotions, who really have seemed to gain a real interest in making sure that Lights not only comes back for next year, but is stronger for next year. The one thing that I will say is that I think for Lights to really, really be strong, they're going to need to show some sort of viewership numbers, because right now, them being locked behind a paywall on NBC Sports Gold, where only the hardest core of the hardcore IndyCar fans are watching that anyway, and how many of them are actually tuning in for the Lights races, I would guess it's not very much. I mean, if there's any way that they can get the Lights out from that NBC contract and get them on a YouTube stream or a Twitch stream or a Facebook stream or something like that, I think that would end up being more valuable to the series. We'll just have to see, but the car counts are really the thing that Roger Penske shut down the series for this year. There was a specific quote, I think, that said something like to the effect of Roger Penske thought that 6 cars in an Indy Lights race, wasn't a legitimate series. And, the thing that I said at the time was, and I'm not necessarily disagreeing with Roger Penske's assessment there, but Indy Lights is a pure development series. It's not akin to the Xfinity series in NASCAR, in which NASCAR, to their credit, does a fantastic job of not only promoting that series, getting it on television, getting the car counts up, but also getting the drivers in the spotlight. I mean, everybody who's really connected at IndyCar knows that Kyle Kirkwood is the next big thing. Does the general public know that Kyle Kirkwood is the next big thing? No. So that's going to be the challenge for Indy Lights and car counts. Now, we'll talk about car counts in a little bit because they have given some incentives that I certainly hope will increase the car counts for next year. But I do want to talk about the halo inclusion, because this was one thing that, especially when we started talking years ago about IndyCar cockpit protection, the first thing that I was really thinking was, what's going to happen with Road to Indy? Because to me, yes, you want to protect the cockpits of the IndyCar drivers, and yes, that's higher profile. But there are kids as young as 14, 15 years old who are driving some of these Road to Indy cars. If by the off chance somebody gets struck by a wheel and killed or seriously injured, that's going to be that was going to be incredibly bad optics. Now, we don't have any confirmation yet that 100% that there will be a halo or some sort of extra cockpit protection added to the USF and Indy Pro cars, but we do know that that is apparently in the works, and I certainly hope it's added next year, because I think, again, I speak as a friend, not just as someone reporting on this. We were all very worried about my pal Braden Eves when he had that crash at Indianapolis where the roll bar got sheared off, and I certainly think if there would have been a halo installed on that car, some of his injuries wouldn't have been nearly as severe. So from my perspective, I hope to see not only just Indy Lights have a halo, but all three rungs of the Road to Indy have some sort of a cockpit protection next year. It's also interesting that they didn't go with the halo screen. I assume that part of that was because of a costs. I think the Red Bull unit that they use on the Indy cars is fairly expensive, and to go with a halo, especially made of titanium, which I think is I believe is a cheaper material than carbon fiber, don't quote me on that, is obviously to hopefully again not raise costs to the point where it's prohibitive, where you have 6 injuries. The other interesting thing about the halo is the fact that Indy Lights will be the first car, as far as I'm aware, to have a pure halo on an oval. And that is one where we had heard way back again when we started talking about cockpit protection of this kind in IndyCar racing, that a halo, specifically a halo, would not work on ovals like Texas. Of course, Indy Lights doesn't run there. The high banked ovals. Now, since Indy Lights only runs, I believe, they haven't released a schedule, but we know Iowa's off the calendar now. I think they're just going to be running Gateway and Indianapolis next year, which are fairly low bank tracks. I wonder if they'll be able to get away with just a pure Formula One style halo without any real modifications, because they're not going to have to worry about the banking. That'll be an interesting thing to see. The other thing that I really need to give them credit for is the fact that they are increasing the purses and increasing the incentives to not just win the championship, because that's one of the things, I don't necessarily think it's a criticism about Road to Indy, but it's something that I think doesn't help the car counts very much, is that it's essentially a winner-take-all situation. The fact that there are auxiliary prizes, not just okay, win $1 million in 3 races in IndyCar, and if you finish second in the championship, tough luck. The fact that the top 3 in the championship will get a test, that's a thumbs up from me. Again, Roger Penske mentioned some things when at the beginning of May they announced that they were canceling the series. I think he said something about giving an Indy Lights chassis for free to any of the Leader Circle teams in IndyCar to try to incentivize them to start a Lights team. I don't know if that will happen, and I don't know if that would increase car counts anyway. It'll be interesting to kind of track this as we go into the offseason to see how many teams are signing up. I know there's at least 3 cars that are going to be guaranteed, because there's Kyle Kirkwood, who won Indy Pro last year. There's going to be whoever wins Indy Pro this year, and then whoever wins the Formula 3 championship will get a scholarship from Honda. So there'll at least be 3 cars. I'm sure there'll be a few paid drivers as well that come up the ladder who didn't have any scholarship money. But again, are you just looking at 6 cars? We'll have to wait and see. And finally, Daniel Suarez and Justin Marks have formed a new NASCAR Cup Series team. It's called Trackhouse Racing. It's a Chevy-powered car. RCR supported, actually will be coming out of the Richard Childress Racing shop for the first year. And they have a charter lease from Spire Racing, which is important because Daniel Suarez missed NASCAR's biggest race, the Daytona 500 last year. This will guarantee him an entry not only to the Daytona 500, but to all races in the 2021 season. And certainly this will continue the curious case of Daniel Suarez, or perhaps it's not so curious. I know there's a lot of haters of Suarez out there, or at least people who are detractors, who say that he was one Cole Witt away from not winning the Xfinity Series championship, and then who knows what would have happened to his career. We've seen him bounce around to a couple of different teams the last few years, and I guess I'll just say this. Do you think that anybody, given the circumstances at Gaunt Brothers, would be doing better than Suarez is doing right now? I think he's running right about where he would, or where any driver would, given that equipment. Is this equipment going to be any better? I will say marginally, and here's my logic for that. Especially on, I guess you call them the restrictor plate tracks. You used to call them the restrictor plate tracks. I'll try to call them the super speedway tracks because there's not technically a restrictor plate anymore. On the super speedway tracks, the RCR cars are really, really good. We've seen those cars win the Daytona 500 recently with Austin Dillon. We've seen them run up front. Particularly, I think I point to the example of Bubba Wallace, how strong he always seems to be on the plate tracks, or at least how he always runs up front. Ty Dillon's another great example. These small teams seem to really have good cars when they go to the super speedways. So I think from this perspective, I think Suarez will have a good chance on those type of tracks. The RCR cars don't seem to necessarily be as good the rest of the season, especially the affiliate cars. I'm not necessarily talking about the team cars like Austin Dillon's car, for example. This is not going to be a race-winning effort. Again, potentially eating my hat on this one. I don't think this is going to be a race-winning effort right out of the box. I don't think this is going to be a playoff effort right out of the box. But I am excited to see Justin Marks entering the sport as a team owner because he's not only a former driver, but he's a great businessman. And the sport of auto racing just needs new owners, period. New team owners. New guys who are willing to invest. You know, the next wave of the Hendricks and the Gibbs. And you look at Denny Hamlin, you look at Justin Marks, you've starting to get a few new team owners getting into the game. Hopefully they don't get bought out by other teams. That seems to be the name of the game, is new teams come in for a couple of years and either they die financially or they get bought out by a bigger team and conglomerated in XYZ and all this stuff. You would hope something like this doesn't happen coming down the road because, again, I think the important thing for NASCAR and really motorsports as a whole is that new blood gets involved, new team owners, new everybody. Taking a fresh look at the sport is a good thing, and hopefully, and I certainly wish Justin Marks and Daniel Suarez success with the number 99 car because that is important for the future of racing. So, what do you think of any of the stuff I talked about in this video? Let me know down in the comment section below. Be sure to subscribe for more motorsports commentary, and I will see you in the next video.